Life.Church created this podcast because we all need healthy conversations with real people. So this podcast is here to help you start conversations with your life group, friends, and family. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to the You've Heard It Said podcast. This is Jason.
And this is Allie, and I thought we could jump right in with some quick thoughts about what we thought adulthood would look like when we were 17.
Okay, so just list off what we expected it would be like when we graduated.
Yes.
Okay, so things like, I can eat ice cream or pizza whenever I want.
Right.
But honestly, for me, it was like, how am I going to afford to live? I'm probably going to run out of money and have to drop out of college and not make it in life. I was worried about money a lot for some reason.
It is a big concern. But also, I was thinking about, I can stay up as late as I want.
Yeah.
Seriously, no bedtime.
Yeah.
I basically thought it would be like living the dream. It would be like my own One Tree Hill, Friends, 90s or early 2000s sitcom kind of life.
This episode is just so you can talk about One Tree Hill, isn't it?
Okay, no, but anytime I can talk about it, you better believe I'm going to bring it up. So now I thought we could talk about what surprises we faced when we actually became adults.
Okay, so eating ice cream for dinner all the time, not a good idea.
Not great. Also, being responsible for yourself is more stressful in some ways than having other people like your parents take on more responsibility for you.
And then making friends as an adult is awkward.
Right, which is why we made an episode for that a couple weeks ago that you can listen to.
Good plug.
So the reason I had us talk about this today is that I think we have all of these expectations for adulthood that sometimes have very different realities. And one that we don't often think about, but we do feel the weight of, is how our relationships with our families evolve as we become adults.
Yes. This is definitely a very big and important topic.
Right. So I thought you could figure that one out today.
I have an amazing family. I used to think my family was perfect. And I'm realizing that there are a ton of things in my extended family and in my own new family that I just don't know what to do about. I'm not sure how to navigate it or how to fix it. And I finally am at the point where I realize that's okay.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. Me too. It's hard to figure out how to navigate changing expectations for your family when you become an adult. And it's hard to figure out how to find your own boundaries while also loving your family. And our big question today is, how do I relate to my family as an adult? And I'm really excited about our guests. We're going to hear from Allie Evans, who leads all of Next Gen Ministry at LifeChurch.
Yes.
She's so great. She hosts the LC Parents podcast, which you should check out if you're a parent. And she's also got so much wisdom when it comes to parenting, reaching the next generation, and pastoring young adults.
And just so honest.
Right.
Yeah.
And fun. She's very fun. And she's also the mom of 2 young adult daughters, Abby and Madison, who you also get to hear from. And they're going to talk about their experience navigating the family transitions that come after graduation.
And then just a little bit after that, we get to hear from our unofficially official podcast therapist, Kay Gackle. Abby and Madison. I have to admit that I'm feeling kind of outnumbered because I grew up with 7 brothers and no sisters. So can you give me just a few descriptive words, anything that comes to mind that describes what it was like growing up in your house?
Dramatic.
That's a good one.
Lots of tears.
Okay.
But lots of laughs, too.
Yeah. It definitely sounds different than my experience so far, so that's good. So Allison, you're their mom. So you're probably super proud mom right here with them here.
Yes.
Can you just give me your best proud mom introduction of your daughters, Madison and Abby?
Oh, gosh. You really did want to start this off with tears, didn't you? Oh, my word. Look, in the Kleenex box, you guys can't see it, but there's a Kleenex box. Okay, so Madison is the oldest and currently 26. And man, I could not be more proud of the person that she is. She has always been intense. She's always been very driven. She's always had an incredible work ethic. It's true. Which I envy because I tend to not be so intense and a little bit lackadaisical, which works against me oftentimes. So I've always admired her for those attributes. But super passionate about people, has a real servant's heart. Abby It's funny because Abby is kind of a mini me, but honestly so different too at the same time. So we're both the youngest. Okay. So those sort of attributes that the younger sibling has, we both share. But the truth is her creativity, the way she serves people, and particularly as an adult, she has really come into her own as far as, this sounds so crazy, but gift giving. She's very thoughtful. She thinks about the person and what is it that they need in their life, not just what do they want. And I mean, I've just always really admired that she's that way, but man, it's really blossomed.
How does it feel to be seen that way by your mom?
It makes me emotional too a little bit. But if I start crying, I won't be able to stop. But I'm just as proud of her as she is of us.
Oh, thank you.
Very
That's
proud
really
of you.
Sweet. That means a lot.
Okay, so Abby and Madison, you both went away to college. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So I want you to think of a pivotal moment after moving out of the house when you first started to realize there's a difference in my relationship now with my parents.
Well, I think the biggest change in our experience was she wasn't in it all the time. She didn't know our friends. She didn't know those teachers, the community that we were a part of. So whenever we would ask for advice, it'd be more like a consultation instead of someone who's very emotionally invested in each relationship. I think that made things better for me, at least, because then it wasn't such a strong opinion and really emotionally based. It was more of, okay, I can see it from the outside, from this third person perspective.
Her feelings weren't riding on you doing the exact thing that she was recommending you do or something like that.
Right. Or a preconceived idea about someone or something.
Abby, can you think of a moment where it clicked like, I think I now have a different relationship with my mom?
I feel like our relationship didn't change too much. I still came home almost every weekend. We've always had a really close relationship.
I think me moving out was.
So Madison being the oldest, when she moved out, that did change the dynamic of our relationship. It's not like it was bad and it got good or it was good and it got bad. My husband traveled, so Matt actually at that time was living in California Monday through Friday.
Okay.
And so it was just the two of us. And so maybe that's why. Maybe our relationship, we created a different bond during that season. I think we may have done that a little bit earlier.
That's
maybe.
true.
Yeah, I definitely think
that's good.
Because when I would come back, it was different.
One of the things I'm hearing is that there wasn't like some moment where all of a sudden your mom just changed the way she related with you, or all of a sudden you guys just changed the way you related. It was almost like you were set up for it to work well. Is that fair to put it that way? Like,
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that we've been. I think because I'm the older child, you guys had a lot of opinions about how I should grow up and things like that. And so I think our relationship changed a lot whenever I went to college. Once we got to this friendship where it's like I can call and tell her about what's going on in my life. And like I said, it would be like a third party weighing in. Then it really changed. It was more of a friendship.
yeah.
That's true. We went through something a little bit different. And I don't think I recognized the tensions that there were during probably the junior, senior year season. Both of the girls were really good kids, so I didn't have to fight that battle. But just relationally, I did have expectations. I probably unintentionally put a lot of expectations on them that I think parents oftentimes do. I won't label everybody, but that can be really challenging. And Madison probably felt that more than Abby because with the first one, it was, it's just a little bit more rough.
So this has me wondering, Madison and Allie, if you don't mind answering, when that transition happened from going from like, oh, it feels like there might be a lot of pressure for me to do things a certain way. And then it transitioned to what you described, Madison, as more of like, my mom is like a guide or a consultant and her emotions are less tied to what I tell her. Did that just happen on accident, or how did you all figure that out?
I think mine was being more aware of what information I could share with her, figuring that out. So I did a lot of that my freshman and sophomore year. And then I think we got to a place where I could share more of what was actually going on in my life.
What helped you to feel more comfortable to share more?
Well, actually, Abby. Because Abby has never had any problem telling either of my parents what's going on or what she's up to or at all.
And she's smirking like
No,
the youngest child
I mean,
right
out
now.
of the two of us, I definitely think I'm more of a rule follower than Abby. But I think just watching her and my mom's relationship, she really could share everything and they were like friends that I felt more like, this isn't as bad as what Abby's sharing. So
I think that there was a reset that happened probably your freshman, sophomore year, because you would still call me and tell me somebody hurt my feelings or something happened at the sorority house or whatever. And we would hash through those things. But there was a reset that happened, I think. And it was the distance. And it probably was me not knowing every single thing that not just went on in their lives, but went on in every one of their friends' lives. So having her living away and me not being deeply involved did allow us to make that transition.
So a follow-up question for you, Allie. If you went back to, let's say, 6 months before maybe the hardest moment of your relationship where you're figuring that out, you're in the mix, and you were able to give yourself advice from everything that you've learned since then, what advice would you give?
Oh gosh, there's probably two pieces of advice. One is don't act shocked. So if your child tells you something, that means A, they're saying you're a safe place. If you act shocked, then you're suddenly saying, I'm not a safe place. So don't do that. Don't act shocked no matter what. Because sometimes your kids will come to you and say, my best friend blank.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? And what they wanted to tell you next, they're not going to tell you because you freaked out.
You got me thinking about my little kids. My
Man,
goodness.
I'm telling you, I've done it wrong. And then there are times when I know that I've done it and it allowed for a lot more healthy conversation afterwards.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing.
Really quick,
Yeah.
what does a not shocked reaction look like, sound like? How do I do that?
Right. One time, Madison and I were driving in the car, and she told me that it was a science teacher, I think, said something like, if lightning struck a rock, that's how the first cell was created. And then from that, eventually, thousands of years later, there was life.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do was wreck the car. I'm like, all of a sudden, my child is questioning God as the creator. And in that moment, I handled it well.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, tell me about that. And two, another note for parents is your kids will tell you the craziest things in the car because they're not looking at you. So take advantage of all the car opportunities that you can and just don't act shocked. Just ask the question, tell me about that. What did your teacher say? What do you think? Does that line up with the things that you already believed? And just ask questions.
So when your kids say something that surprises you, don't act shocked, act curious.
Yes, just ask questions.
It's great.
Because they obviously want to talk to you about it, whatever it is. And I've also done it poorly. As Madison mentioned, Abby has always been way willing to share things with me that I'm like, pardon me, what? And so the second piece of advice, don't act shocked would be the first piece. The second piece of advice would be to create an environment, a conversational environment with your child that they always feel comfortable saying the first thing. And recognize that when they say something that could be shocking, they're doing it on purpose because they want to open up to you.
Okay, that's great. Madison, would you be willing to go back maybe a few months before that, the most difficult part in your relationship, and give yourself some advice?
I think what I've learned as I've gotten older is your parents are not perfect. They're figuring this out too. And at the time, you never know that.
Right.
You always think that they know what they're doing. But I think as you get older, you realize that they're figuring it out too. I think that's the biggest piece of advice. Like myself as a teenager, I wish I would have thought about more.
Yeah. Don't you notice that as you admit to yourself that your parents aren't perfect, all of a sudden you have more affection for them too? It's like all of a sudden they're so much easier to love because they're like a real person and, oh, they're like me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. We're going to move to a little bit more of some practical ideas. I would just love to hear from you all. What are some practical boundaries that have really helped your relationship to thrive? Hi, it's Jason, and I'm pausing this conversation to tell you about something that helps me a ton as a parent. Allie Evans, who you're listening to right now, is the host of the LC Parents podcast, and it's one of those things that just ends up changing the way you live your life. And if you feel like you might need some parenting relief or just someone who gets you, you're going to love it. And you can find it in your favorite podcast app or learn more at www.life.church/parents.
I actually think my mom's done really well at asking us when we want to do stuff and not expecting us to be somewhere, especially after I moved away. I moved to Austin after I graduated. And so whenever I would come to town, it was always like, okay, here's some stuff going on with the family. If you would like to go do that with your time here, you can. Because I was also dating someone in Oklahoma City. So whenever I would come home, it was like I had a weekend to spend time with him and then also see family and friends that I hadn't seen in a while. So I feel like she did a really good job of asking us when we wanted to be places or asking us if we can help with something.
Right.
It was never expected. And so I think that that's a huge issue in a lot of families, and I see with a lot of my friends, is their parents expect them to be somewhere or expect them to do something. I think a lot of people have to put boundaries as far as there shouldn't be an expectation that I'm going to be somewhere or help with something. It really needs to be an ask.
Yeah. So, Allie, I heard you whisper something under your breath a second ago. Would you just say it again out loud for us?
We're horrible at boundaries.
So what made you say that?
When I think about boundaries, I think about rules.
Okay.
And I think about rules when the girls were growing up and those kinds of things. And we just didn't have a lot of hard and fast, here are all the rules.
Okay.
But listening to Madison's response, when I think about as adults, how we relate to one another and some of those kinds of things, something that both of the girls have actually moved away and moved back home at different times. So they went away to college and for various reasons came and moved back into the house. We always sort of had this open door idea that if you needed to move back home for whatever reason, come back. I mean, why not? And because they really are my best friends, why wouldn't I want my best friend living in my house? So that would be really why, even as adults, I guess it's an anti-boundary.
Right.
Like, sure, you can move back.
I don't think it is an anti-boundary because when I think of boundaries, I think, this sets kind of like the limit or the wall or the barrier. That's like maybe your first thought, and that's more of a rules focus.
Yeah, that's
but
good.
You just described an open door, which is also a boundary.
That's true.
So you've said, here's a door, there's a gate here, and I'm actually going to open it up and say, you can come through anytime you want.
Yeah, that's good.
And you've created expectations. The expectation is this is a safe place to be. And those are also very real boundaries. I'm sure there's been times where you've had conversations about the smallest things of like super loud music past 3 a.m. or whatever. Those are just the natural things we talk about and have to as adults. Okay, that's really helpful. Any thoughts from you, Abby, on boundaries that have been helpful in your relationship?
When I did my 5th year of college, I moved back home, and my high school friends, they knew my mom from high school because it was always my house that we would come to. So I don't think in high school I did things to where when I moved back home, she had to be like, we're not repeating this again. It was more like excitement, like, let's have fun.
And it was the same thing for the girls. Abby's friends, they had refrigerator privileges.
Right.
And they knew that they could come in anytime and stay with us.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is it's hard to identify with that word boundaries because you felt so much openness and invitation, like even refrigerator privileges. That's actually a boundary. You have said, hey, here's what's possible. I love the way that, honestly, that I hear you talking about boundaries because it feels like, man, I'd want to be in that family. Okay, rapid fire questions here. If one of your friends told you that they were struggling to get along with either their parents or their kids, what's the first thing that you would recommend they do?
What's like the context of the struggle?
Let's just say that it's really hard for them to get along with their parent because every time they share something vulnerable, their parent freaks out.
I want to answer that because this actually happened with me and Madison not too long ago. She shared something, and I did the freak out. It wasn't really a huge freak out, but I didn't respond the way that I should have. I acted more shocked than I recommended earlier. And what I appreciated about Madison's response to that was she called me on it. And she said, when you behave like that, I don't want to trust you with this stuff. And it was a very adult response. So that was pretty cool. That was a good moment. Well, it was good on the backside of it.
Yeah.
In the moment, it wasn't great, but...
I feel like if there's a struggle with a parent having a lot of opinions about your life, if there's something that you know is going to be controversial or they're going to have a lot of opinions about it, this is what I'm going to do. I don't really think you leave the conversation up to opinion. And I don't ever suggest being disrespectful or anything like that. But I think going into the conversation, having a clear what I'm going to do, and then I need your help of how I'm going to get there.
So you're talking about bringing some confidence to the situation, but also some openness.
Right.
I love that combination. So Abby, for you, I'm going to give you a specific example. If you are struggling with a parent or your friend is struggling with a parent and maybe their parent is always saying, I don't think you should be hanging around so-and-so, or I don't think you should be dating so-and-so. What advice do you give them?
First of all, definitely take their opinion into consideration because they normally do have your best interest at heart and just want the best for you. But also maybe try to bring up the good parts of the relationship or friendship that they might not see. Because truthfully, I think about when in relationships or friendships, I don't always call my mom when something good has happened. If I get a sweet text from my boyfriend, I'm not screenshotting that, sending it to her, or telling her that my friend bought my lunch today.
Yeah.
But when a boyfriend messes up or your friend messes up, I call my mom first thing and I'm like, listen to what he did or she did.
Yeah.
And so I think parents don't always see all the good things about the friendships and relationships in your life, but they hear about all the bad things because you're hurt and you're crying and you want to talk to somebody about it.
So we started by each of you giving like a simple couple word definition of what it was like growing up. I'm curious now if you were to just give 1 or 2 words to describe your relationship today. Give me a couple words.
I would say for me, easy, fun, like a friend.
I would definitely say friendship.
I think I would describe our adult relationship. This really isn't the right word, but respect. Because as adults, I have a great deal of respect for both of the girls. They're both incredible humans. And viewing them as adults as opposed to viewing them as my children helps me with that. They both actually inspire me.
Okay, last question. Can I have refrigerator rights too? I kind of want to be in your family.
Jason, you've got refrigerator rights for sure.
Open door.
Okay, we're so glad to have you back. You're our unofficially official podcast therapist, so we're all really glad to have you.
Aw.
So my first question, we're talking all about families today, which
Okay.
can be kind of emotionally charged. So my first question is, what does it look like to set boundaries with my family without hurting anyone's feelings now that I'm an adult?
That's a really good question. I think it's helpful if we sort of define what boundary is. And so by definition, at its core, it's a point or a limit that indicates where two things become different. So if you even think about it in property lines, it's where my house ends and yours begins. That's a property line. That's a boundary line. So if we think of that in relationship terms, it's where I end and you begin. And the reality is boundaries are learned. And so we learn these in our childhood. And so if you didn't grow up in a home where boundaries were accepted or even taught in a healthy way, setting them up as an adult can be extra hard, right? So for instance, if you weren't ever allowed to say no or disagree within your family of origin as a young child, then you probably didn't learn healthy boundaries. And there's a big difference between not being allowed to say no or disagree and not being allowed to be disrespectful in it. And so how we teach our children this and how we learn this as children matters. If I want my child to be able to say no to someone hurting them, the reality is they learn that boundary at home. And so on this kind of same note, children also should learn that it's not their responsibility to make someone else feel better. We can have empathy and we can care for them. But at the end of the day, I end and they start at some point. And this can even look in a subtle way in parent and child relationship where the parent, if let's say there's 2 children playing and a toy gets taken away from your child, and then the parent says, it hurts us when you get angry. What did the child learn? Well, when I get angry, I have to be thinking about how it makes you feel versus me learning that I'm responsible for my own feelings and I have to make decisions out of those. These are things we either learned in childhood or we didn't learn. And so to acknowledge that and say, where are we starting from? We need to know that this might be a little hard and I'm sort of changing the rules of our family dynamic, even if it's for a healthier relationship on both ends. The goal isn't to hurt someone's feelings. The goal is to have healthier interactions and healthier relationships within what is in yours to control. So the how we set boundaries matters. It's a very different conversation if I say to you, you've been needing me too much. I can't talk for 30 minutes every day, so I'm not going to answer the phone anymore after 6, right? Or if I say, hey, my days are really full. I want to give you a good time to talk, so I'm going to set aside this hour so that we can really catch up. The end goal might look exactly the same, but the how you've done it and really even the why. So why are you setting the boundary? What are the lines you're drawing and why are you drawing them? Is it to just be mean? Well, then I would say that's probably not setting a healthy boundary, right? But if it's to have a good interaction, to really give somebody your best of who you are, well, then we can decide what that looks like and how that looks.
That's really helpful. So how should I approach my family's opinions as it relates to my decisions, especially as I'm an adult?
So, I think it's good to consider other people's thoughts and opinions, especially your parents. As it turns out, they've lived life, right? More than you have. And so I don't think it's a terrible thing to consider anybody's thoughts or feelings. It's just the reminder of, as an adult, you are responsible for you. And without good boundaries, we can start living in the wishes of others, or we can start taking on their feelings rather than figuring out what we think or what we want to decide. And also, when you do take their advice and then it doesn't work out, that's a breeding ground for resentment. And honestly, that's not a healthy relationship, and that's the whole goal of this. And so knowing where the lines are for yourself, and again, where you stop and where they begin is really helpful. So if you find yourself making decisions or choices based on the reaction of someone else or even the reaction of yourself, like to avoid feeling bad, I would say some healthy boundaries are needed. We can respond to all of those situations without reacting to them. That's a very different approach. And so boundary setting, when it's new, it can sort of stir up this feeling of like doubt or fear or guilt. It can feel wrong. But in the same way, like with working out, at the very initial beginning of working out, it can feel uncomfortable or painful even, but we know that it's a healthy option. And so in the same ways, boundary setting can be healthy and accompanied by some negative feelings. And so we just need to acknowledge that part of it. And so we also might acknowledge that other people might react. So you can hear the verbal on the other end, or someone might even say, well, that's selfish, or give you an off-the-cuff remark. And so one thing I always say in therapy is that if we are moving towards a healthier relationship on our end, and even if the other people don't see it, we know that we are loving them well because we're not giving ourselves up at all cost. We don't have to give up all of ourselves to actually have peace. There's ways to do it. We can lead with compassion and appreciation and empathy, and that sort of keeps us grounded without causing all of this defensiveness to take place. And in the parent relationship, we can show appreciation for what we're grateful for in that relationship, or even the intent of their behaviors. So for example, if you have a parent that regularly interferes in your romantic relationship, you can say that you appreciate their concern for you or appreciate that they want what's best for you, and you would also like for them to stop so that you can make your own decisions. Showing your parents appreciation tells them that you still value them showing up in your life. You would just like how they show up to look a little different. So oftentimes we hear people use the conjunction of but here. I don't know if you can hear me emphasizing and a lot, but oftentimes people use the word but as if it's two opposing thoughts. But if I were to say to you, I know you love me and I need some space right now. I know you're concerned for me and I need to make this decision for myself. It's a nuance of a word, but it does communicate that both things are true and they can act together. They can all be one giant thing that moves us all towards a healthier relationship together. And so even those just two statements that I said are clear and simple and concise. Sometimes we feel the need to go into this big giant explanation of why we can't do something or why we're not going to show up somewhere. But the reality is we don't have to do that. I don't have to tell you about all the reasons why I need space. I need to know why I need space. But I don't always have to go into the whole explanation of it and to justify all those things.
That's helpful. So what about people who may have trauma associated with their families? What might be a healthy next step for them to take if their family isn't even in a place where boundaries are going to be appreciated or reciprocated or respected or anything like that?
So yes, sometimes we have childhoods where our trauma is present because our parents are the ones suffering from a personality disorder or alcoholism. And so their boundaries inherently are not great. Right. They haven't practiced them, they haven't taught them. And in fact, the child learns to sort of navigate not having those boundaries and trying to keep themselves safe by walking on eggshells or giving up themselves at all costs so that they can keep the peace in the home. And so just recognizing if that is where you are coming from, to just acknowledge that again and just say, this is going to be a little more challenging. And the more clear and simple and concise your statements are, the easier boundaries are to keep. And you might have to repeat them, and that's okay. That's totally normal. It's normal for anybody, but it's definitely normal when a little bit more trauma is present.
So part of the reason I had us talk about expectations versus reality about adulthood is that I think we do the same thing when it comes to our families. So even right now, people listening might be thinking like, oh, well, Allie and her daughter sound like they have a perfect relationship. In fact, like, I kind of want to ask them the same question you did, Jason. Like, can I have refrigerator rights in this family?
Right. And you know what? The reason I asked the question is really interesting for me because I was listening and their family sounded great, but it wasn't because they sounded perfect. To me, it felt like they've been willing to deal with the hard things. And that made me want to be part of their family. So we just all experience this differently. But back to the idea of people who might feel like, well, that's a perfect family. I just can tell you it's not true. I've been part of a family that's wonderful, but no family is perfect, right? And I think any family that has some health, they've just had to put a ton of work to get to that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we all have this idea of like what the perfect family looks like, whether it's like a sitcom that you watch and you're like, oh, it seems so perfect, or you hear somebody else's story. And then if yours misses that expectation you have, you kind of feel frustrated, which can lead to either passive aggressive or maybe outright aggressive family drama sometimes.
Right. That outright aggressive family drama. I just want to stay as far away from that as I can. But yeah, the perfect family doesn't exist, except this perfect parent-child relationship between Jesus and the Father. Jesus talks about that a bunch in Scripture.
Right, 100%. But also, the Bible is full of some pretty jacked up families, like when Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery.
Right. And then there's King David, who's like overlooked by his whole family on multiple occasions, like he's a leftover, left out runt, and then God chooses him to be king. And then later in Psalms 68, he writes, God sets the lonely in families. And I'm just like, ooh, I can feel that a little bit, just knowing his story. And I remember the first time I read that scripture, I was thinking, God knows what he's doing with families. And that doesn't mean that all the messed up stuff in your family was his idea. It just means that he knows what he's doing. And I wonder if David was thinking about some other people as his new family that maybe he wasn't even born into. So that's just something to consider. And also, as we consider the things that Kay talked about, there are so many family dynamics that are going to change over time. She gave us this really helpful framework that the way that we relate to our families as adults, it's going to be different than when we were kids, and that's okay. And like we learned from Allie and Abby and Madison, it'll change based on your personality, based on your relationship. It's going to change from sibling to sibling. And when it comes to this idea of prioritizing like your childhood family versus the family that you're growing now, I think I'm learning that priority level needs to be clear and it's okay for it to change over time. When we prioritize the right relationships, it helps us to add value to all relationships. And it helps us to follow God's idea, God's plan for family.
Absolutely. And we don't mean to tie this episode up with a bow and then like send you on your way, because the reality is families are messy and they can be really emotionally charged. But like we talked about in this episode, boundaries play such an important role in our family health. And so we have to be willing to have those uncomfortable and sometimes hard conversations with the people we love most so that we can relate to each other in a healthier way. And let's be clear, if you are dealing with a situation that involves a lot of trauma, that may not be your next step. You might need to see a counselor, or maybe set firmer boundaries about your family relationships, because that's the healthy thing for all of you.
Right. And there's not some neat takeaway or tweetable answer to wrap this one up, but we do have a challenge for you this week. Have a conversation about the things that you've heard said and figure out your next step for relating to your family in your current stage of life. So talk about this question with your life group and your friends and your family. How am I currently relating to my family in my current stage of life? Like, just what does it look like right now? And what changes might I need to make, or boundaries do I need to set to have healthier relationships with my family?
And those can be heavy questions, but just have grace for yourself and for other people when you talk about them. And just remember that your Heavenly Father is always ready and willing to give you wisdom for those things when you ask Him for it.
Right.
Hi, friends. We've been talking about relationships all season long, and we want to encourage you to use this episode to build the relationships in your own life. Remember, we don't want you to just listen to this podcast. Our hope is that you turn it into a conversation with someone you care about. So today, like seriously, right now, send this episode to a friend or your life group and then talk about it. We've even got a conversation guide for you in the show notes to get you started. And if you enjoyed today's episode, would you take a second to leave a rating and review? It really does help more people find the podcast. Have a great week.